3 million people died in 12 months. Not from bombs. Not from invasion. From starvation. While warehouses sat full of grain just miles away. This was Bengal, 1943. And it wasn't an accident. A woman named Kesto sat outside a Calcutta relief kitchen in October 1943. Her 3 children had died in 6 weeks. She weighed 62 pounds. A British photographer captured her skeletal frame. The photo was immediately censored. Banned from publication. Nobody in London could see what was happening. But here's what nobody talks about. The famine didn't start with a crop failure. It started with a policy decision made 4,000 miles away. In a war cabinet room in Westminster. By the man the world calls a hero. Winston Churchill personally blocked food shipments to Bengal. While people were dying at a rate of 30,000 per week. His cabinet begged him to act. He refused. And what he said about Indians during those meetings will make your blood run cold. Let's go back 1 year. 1942, Japan just invaded Burma. Britain's Eastern Empire was collapsing fast. Bengal was Britain's richest colony. 60 million people lived there. It produced jute, rice, and tax revenue that funded the war effort. The British had ruled Bengal for 185 years. They'd engineered famines before. 1770, 1783. 1897, each time, millions died. But 1943 would be different. Worse. The architect was Winston Churchill himself. In January 1943, his war cabinet implemented something called the denial policy. The goal was simple. Deny resources to Japan if they invaded. But here's how they did it. The British Army confiscated every boat in Bengal. Every single fishing vessel. Every river transport. 66,500 boats total. They burned them. Smashed them. Sank them. Overnight, Bengal's transportation network collapsed. Fishermen couldn't fish. Farmers couldn't move rice. Markets couldn't function. Then came the scorched earth policy. British forces bought up all rice stocks in coastal regions. They stockpiled it in military depots. They exported it to Ceylon for Allied troops. Bengal's rice stayed locked in warehouses. While the markets ran dry. By March 1943, rice prices doubled. By June, they'd increased 400%. A shopkeeper named Chittaranjan Das watched his stock vanish in weeks. He told a relief worker the army bought everything. Paid above market rate. Left nothing for locals. The government called it war strategy. But there was no invasion. Japan never came. The boats stayed destroyed. The rice stayed locked away. And people started dying. By July 1943, villages were emptying. Families walked 100 miles to Calcutta searching for food. They found nothing. The streets filled with corpses. 2,000 people were dying every day in Calcutta alone. The British provincial government panicked. They sent urgent telegrams to London. The Viceroy of India, Lord Linlithgow, cabled Churchill directly. He requested immediate food shipments from Australia. Just 150,000 tons of wheat. Enough to prevent total collapse. Churchill read the telegram on July 29, 1943. His response shocked the cabinet. He refused. Not just refused. He mocked the request. Secretary of State for India, Leopold Amery, recorded Churchill's exact words in his diary. Churchill said, quote, "I hate Indians. They are a beastly people with a beastly religion." He blamed Indians for breeding like rabbits. He said the famine was their own fault for multiplying. Amery was horrified. He wrote that Churchill's views were, quote, Hitler-like. But here's what nobody expected. Churchill didn't just refuse aid. He actively diverted food away from Bengal. In August 1943, Australia offered 100,000 tons of wheat. Ready to ship. Churchill's war cabinet rejected it. They redirected those ships to British reserves in the Mediterranean. The reserves were already full. Meanwhile in Bengal, a farmer named Upendranath Brahmachari watched his entire village die. His wife. His 4 children. His parents. He survived by eating grass and leaves. A relief worker found him in September weighing 71 pounds. His testimony was recorded but never published. The British censored all famine coverage. No newspapers. No photographs. No evidence. But the dying continued. And it was about to get exponentially worse. November 1943. The death toll hit 100,000 per week. Churchill's own cabinet members were breaking rank. Leopold Amery confronted Churchill in a war cabinet meeting on November 10. He had new data. It proved Bengal had enough rice. The problem wasn't supply. It was distribution. And policy. Churchill's denial policy had destroyed distribution. His export policies had drained reserves. His refusal of aid had killed millions. Amery demanded Churchill reverse course. Allow food imports. Release military stockpiles. Stop grain exports. Churchill's response is documented in cabinet meeting minutes. He said relief would accomplish nothing. He said Indians would just keep breeding. Then he said something that reveals the entire truth. He asked, quote, "Why hasn't Gandhi died yet?" This wasn't incompetence. This wasn't wartime necessity. This was deliberate. Ideological. A racist disregard for Indian lives. But here's the part that should enrage you. While Bengalis starved, India was still exporting food. 70,000 tons of rice left India for Britain in 1943. Ceylon received 80,000 tons. Greece got emergency shipments of 100,000 tons. Australia sent wheat to Allied troops across Europe. But Bengal got nothing. A Nobel Prize-winning economist named Amartya Sen later proved something crucial. He showed there was no absolute food shortage in Bengal in 1943. Total food availability was higher than in 1941, when there was no famine. The famine was man-made. Created by policy. By Churchill's policies. By December 1943, the streets of Calcutta were cleared. Not because the famine ended. Because 2.1 million people were already dead. The British provincial government finally overruled London. They distributed military rice stocks. They imported grain from Punjab. The dying slowed. But the final death toll reached 3 million by early 1944. Churchill never apologized. Never acknowledged his role. When informed of the death toll in 1944, he allegedly blamed Indians for, quote, breeding like rabbits. The British government buried the evidence. Classified the documents. Censored the testimonies. For 30 years, the world barely knew it happened. The Bengal famine of 1943 killed more people than the atomic bombs dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki combined. But most history classes never mention it. Churchill is still celebrated as a hero. His racism is excused as a product of his time. But documents don't lie. Cabinet minutes don't lie. 3 million corpses don't lie. This wasn't an accident. It was policy. Racist policy that valued British reserves over Indian lives. The British Empire finally declassified the documents in 1974. Historians spent decades piecing together the truth. Amartya Sen won the Nobel Prize partly for his famine research. He proved that famines happen not from lack of food, but from failures of distribution and democracy. Authoritarian systems let people starve. The lesson is simple but brutal. When you dehumanize people, when you see them as less than human, you can watch them die and feel nothing. Churchill did exactly that. And the world gave him a statue in Parliament Square. If a story like this kept you here, subscribe. Because the dark truths they don't teach keep coming. And speaking of hidden atrocities, did you know the British Empire ran concentration camps decades before the Nazis? Subscribe and hit the bell for a new dark truth every day.